Hello, everyone. My name is Zephi Francis from American University in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining our webinar on ensuring racial and ethnic minorities succeed in treatment court. Just a few quick announcements. Closed captioning is available, so if you need that feature, please enable it. We are recording and will upload the video to our YouTube page. Lastly, before the webinar ends, we will launch a Zoom poll. Please answer a few questions to help us make improvements for future webinars. There are two great speakers lined up for today. First, Anne Dannerbeck-Janku. She has been very involved in research and enhancing practice in drug courts for much of her career. Since 1998, she has played a lead role in evaluations of Missouri drug courts and reentry courts, and has been active in developing strategies to enhance equity and inclusion in drug courts. She developed a toolkit to help enhance equity and inclusion in adult drug courts, and recently developed materials for a toolkit to enhance equity in juvenile treatment courts. Second, Amanda Johnson will join us. She is a treatment court graduate from North Carolina. Currently, she serves as a personal care aide for Brighter Day Healthcare. After both speakers present, we will open the floor up for a Q&A. You should see the panel for the Q&A to enter questions. This webinar is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance through one of its funded projects here at AU called the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Initiative, or REDI. REDI's mission is to use research, policy development, and training and technical assistance to work with stakeholders in the justice system to rectify racial and ethnic disparities in treatment courts. We encourage treatment courts to complete the RED program assessment tool. In 2024, we will release new tracks for juvenile drug treatment courts, family treatment courts, and mental health courts. Training modules will also be released next year, and we're working on issue briefs related to topics on RED. So please be on the lookout for future resources. I should also mention that both Anne and Amanda both serve on our advisory board for REDI. So as we go through the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box to enter any questions that you have, and we'll save them to the end. So now I'll turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for being present today for this important topic. So what we're going to do today is very briefly look at how policies contribute to participant success and failure, review how to incorporate culture into our treatment courts, and give you an overview of what other courts around the country are actually doing, what kind of innovations they're creating to ensure that everyone has an equal chance to participate in their program and to successfully complete it. And then I will turn the presentation over to my colleague Amanda to discuss the experience of an individual in treatment court. Next slide, please. For a while now, we've been emphasizing the importance of data and knowing who's in your program based on sociodemographic characteristics. But we're beginning to recognize that we can't simply put people into categories. We have to understand, well, what is the meaning of those categories? Why is it that it's important to look at different racial and ethnic groups in our programs? And culture is what can really help us to understand the meaning of being part of a particular sociodemographic group. Culture, ways of being. It's expressed certainly through how we dress. For instance, if you think about the different people in a treatment court setting, you can look at people and oftentimes get a sense of their particular role. A judge is more likely to be more formally dressed. Other staff members may be less formally dressed. Maybe they wear business casual, so to speak. And then participants may be dressed based on more on what they can afford to wear, frankly, at this point in their lives. The role of food is another part of culture. For example, if we have food days or if we have family events where we invite people to come in, we often serve food. It's part of the culture. It's how we welcome people. And then language. If you think about it, coming into a treatment court, whether as a professional staff person or as a participant, involves learning what is a different language. There's different terminology, different acronyms that are used in treatment court as opposed to elsewhere in society. So we have to learn the language. The interpretation of events, including illness and recovery, is part of culture as well. Understanding what something means to an individual. We may say someone has a substance use disorder, but to them, it may have a different label. It may mean something different. And healing, recovery may differ too, based on our background, our beliefs, and our culture. And then finally, another aspect of culture that impacts treatment courts is our social interactions and the way we address people, whether it's formally or informally, the way we approach someone in an authority position versus in a position where someone doesn't have much power. It's controlled by our culture. And coming from different cultures, when we interact, sometimes that can lead to some stress, some misunderstandings. Thus, it's important to understand each other's cultures and be attuned to the fact that we have different cultures that we bring together in our treatment court setting. Next one. Creating a treatment court culture involves thinking about how we can support both staff and clients. And our culture in our treatment court often gets shaped by what's happening in our staffings. Treatment court culture can certainly impact retention, the culture of our staff. As we move through these slides, you're going to notice some color coding. The red words indicates a research finding. Then the green words are a signal of a general approach to take to align with that research finding. And then the blue words are examples of what programs are actually doing. So this first one is graduation rate disparities are reduced when defense, probation, and the program coordinator attend staffings. And these research findings, by the way, are based on evaluations of hundreds of programs and then combining the results of all of them to come up with the analysis and the results that I'm sharing. And these were mainly done by NPC research. So what can we do at our staffings? Not only be present at the table, but to encourage all team members to contribute to the discussions that are held. Because sometimes what happens is there's one or two dominant voices at the table, maybe because of the power of their voice or something else. Their power of their personality may also matter. So being sure that we're inclusive in allowing everyone who comes to that table to have an equal voice in the conversations is number one thing that can be important, because that impacts our clients. How we move forth from that table, what we say to them. So at that table, at our staffings, we need to be able to identify what are the needs of our clients and from our different perspectives, and then to coordinate services for them so that we don't have any kind of conflicts of a client being told, oh, you need to go here and you need to go there by two different people, and having miscommunication and misunderstandings that ultimately lead to more problems and complications for our clients, which is the opposite of what we need to do. One way that some programs really have explored how to better support their clients in terms of culture is to identify resources with a cultural basis in their community, and then to try to incorporate those cultural resources into their programming, to be able to make referrals. What one program did, though, what they learned is not uncommon that when you go out and take the time to develop relationships with agencies or cultural resources, as in this case, that over time, maybe you forget that you even have that relationship, you have that connection. So what one program did was add to their staffing sheet a list of all those cultural resources as a prompt to remind them we have these resources available to support our clients. So here they are on the staffing sheet. We can make a referral based on them. And that's something that is a promising practice. Next slide, please. Something else that we can do that's really part of the culture of our staffing and our program too is to use data. Because some of us come from professions where we really didn't have much training in statistics and data. And it seems like something that is not so familiar and comfortable for us. But the fact is, graduation rate disparities are reduced by 59% when the team regularly reviews data on the service provision outcomes and also in terms of following up to make program modifications. So what can we do? We can teach all of our staff to be able to measure disparities in their program, how to do it, how to use data, looking at different performance indicators, such as receipt of services, breaking it down by sociodemographic variables for race and ethnicity, and then use the data to understand where problems are occurring, why the problems are emerging, and then find practical solutions. For example, you may find in your program that maybe the African Americans are not being retained at the same rate as Caucasians. And when you go back and look at your entry statistics, you discover a big difference in unemployment at entry, because we know from multiple studies that being employed when you enter the program is a strong predictor of likelihood to graduate. But as in this example, 75% of African Americans and 20% of Caucasians are unemployed at entry. What does that suggest? That suggests that we need to maybe make some modifications, that we need to put more emphasis on job readiness, skill training, offering those resources in job coaching, and maybe even making more connections with potential employers. Various things we can do to modify our program to improve the retention of individuals based on employment status. So what do programs do? In some places, there's recognizing that there's a great deal of data you could look at about your program, and it can get overwhelming to look at it all the time. Every 6 months, what some programs do is alternate looking at access data, which would be data on who's getting in the program, who's not getting in the program, why are people not getting in the program, and then retention data. What kind of services are people getting? How long are they staying in the program before they're terminated, and who's successfully completing the program? So every 6 months, alternating that and making it part of what the team does, the culture, using data to inform what you do. Next slide. We also need to recognize the role of culture in our clients' lives and the meaning of it. The quotes over there, we treat everyone the same in our program, had staff say to me, whereas participants have said, this program lacks any kind of cultural significance. I can't connect, I can't relate to what it offers. Culture reflects our adaptation to both the physical and the social environment. If you think, for example, on the physical side, take the example of food real quickly. Some parts of the world, they have rice, big part of the culture because that's what they grow there. Other places have access to wheat, so they develop breads, pastas, and that sort of thing. It becomes part of the culture. It's adaptation to what's available in the physical environment. What's relevant for our treatment court is neighborhood, where people live. Because let's face it, even today, if you go out and Google residential segregation in my community, you often find very distinct areas where people live based on their race and ethnicity. And there's implications of that, of this long-term legacy of segregation in neighborhoods. Limited resources as part of it, less jobs, less opportunity to succeed, and a low sense of self-efficacy. a belief that I, as an individual, can go out, can set a goal and go achieve it, because I'm not seeing people around me in my neighborhood being able to achieve any kind of goals. It's a struggle. So people adapt their culture then to survive in those kind of environments. And the same with the social environment. For our participants, discrimination may be a very real aspect of their life. Disease causes and treatments is another part of this, of recognizing based on what's in my realm of control and the resources I can access, here's what I understand about the disease cause and how to treat it. When I'm thinking of here are some alternative treatments, such as those that are faith-based, relying on spirituality, on prayer for healing rather than medication. Our views about the justice system are based on our social environment, what we've observed, what we've seen, whether we see it as something that supports us and our family or something that is a threat, a risk. And the role of family and other institutions in our life, and for us in our treatment court journey, the appropriateness of having family involved or not, their kind of support they give, and the same for other institutions. Next slide, please. So it's important to integrate client culture in our treatment courts. Individuals respond more positively to interventions that respect and respond to their values, traditions, and needs, that is, that respond to their culture. When we practice an ideology of colorblindness, that is, we say, oh, we treat everybody the same, what research shows is that actually it's ineffective, it provokes interracial tension, and promotes inequality. So what can we do instead? Well, one thing is to train staff to be attuned to the language clients use in describing ailments, and ask them how their healing and recovery is pursued in their own culture. Because we may have in our own mind, based on our culture, our experiences, an idea of how to treat any kind of illness, including a substance use disorder or a mental health disorder. But our clients may see it differently. And we have to come to a common understanding of what it is that's the ailment and how best to treat it, merging our views, the tradition of treatment court and the culture of our clients. And often it helps too to connect clients to community resources to help them celebrate their culture, because you often find that clients have been marginalized on their journey into substance use from their own culture and the resources that are there to support and strengthen them. And they need bridges back to it, to those resources. So helping bridge those connections back to the community can be something that's helpful. So what do programs do? One thing is to offer HEAT, the Habilitation, Empowerment, and Accountability Therapy. It's a manualized cognitive behavioral therapy that's designed for individuals who identify with the culture of young Black men. Talk about it a little bit more here in a minute. Next slide, please. So what some programs have done is to create a culturally relevant track. And an example I like to share is that of Voices in Colorado, 18th Judicial Circuit. First, they recognized that there was a disparity in outcomes between African American and Caucasian men, especially young men. So they created a community advisory group to help guide them on a process of identifying resources and supports for their participants. Then they gave the participants themselves a voice in creating culturally relevant programming. They asked them, well, what do you need? What would be meaningful and helpful to you? And through the voices of the community and the participants, they identified HEAT as one aspect of what they needed, employment coaching, alternatives to NA and AA, and also because HEAT is a 9-month program and treatment court often lasts 18 months, they wanted some kind of a support group to continue after HEAT. So they created a culturally homogeneous support group for individuals who'd been through heat to continue to have that cultural resource and support there for them. And then as they began to unroll the program in these program elements, they got some concerns from probation and the DA's office about, well, is it really fair though if you're offering this only for a certain group? And as the program explained, it's offered to everyone, and those who feel it will be appropriate are invited to join. And if someone doesn't feel it's appropriate, then they don't have to join. And that's how they address that concern. Next slide, please. So we want to also offer culturally equitable treatment. That is treatment that it may look different, but the outcomes will be the same. Treatment completion is more likely when interventions focus on lived experiences as opposed to simply matching participants to same culture providers or training providers on things like implicit bias and sensitizing them to cultural issues. You may initially engage people to participate if they see staff members, other people in the program who look like them, who come from the same culture, or who have some understanding of their culture. But to retain them, we really need to focus on the lived experience of the participants. So things to do. First, address the role of trauma and discrimination as life experiences that impact our clients. We may not commonly be screening people for discrimination and the associated trauma, but maybe that's something we can do moving forward. Another thing to do is to nurture both self and collective efficacy. I mentioned before in the neighborhood section about efficacy, but giving ways to nurture efficacy, give clients a voice in their treatment, in the team members who support them, and in determining when they're ready to phase up. Because I often hear that from staff that, well, we're the ones that initiate phasing up, but maybe we should consider giving our clients a voice in that. And also to offer treatment modalities that have the same outcomes for all clients. And so what some programs do is offer either HEAT or another cognitive behavioral therapy, and then supplement it with coaches to help clients apply the lessons that they learn in treatment. Next slide, please. And then very important is to seek client feedback. And that QR code there will take you to the All Rise exit interview form, which has a number of questions on it related specifically to addressing disparities. Research says Black and Hispanic individuals report less satisfaction in treatment and often feel they receive treatment that's not commensurate with their needs. So we need to seek feedback from clients about all aspects of the program, including orientation, what they heard, what they expected, screening and assessments, interactions with staff, and about the services they receive. To seek feedback, we can conduct interviews, focus groups, or surveys. And what some programs do is instead of waiting and asking questions at the very end in an exit survey, they periodically, maybe around the time of phasing up, while experiences are still fresh, that's when they ask for feedback. Next slide. Another thing we can do is to engage family. Graduation rate disparities are reduced when programs offer family relations counseling and when participants spend free time with family rather than either peers or alone. And often we need to help clients redevelop relationship with family. So what can we do? Create a welcome environment for family members. Welcome families, not individuals, into our program. Offer material and emotional support to family members too, because in order for them to support our clients, the family needs to be able to take care of themselves and their other members of the family. And instead of asking them if they need help, offer it, because often we are reluctant to admit we need help. But if it's put out there for us to take, maybe we'll accept it. So what some programs do, they invite not just clients, but their families to job fairs. They might provide food baskets, maybe at Thanksgiving time, asking clients, how many people will be at your table? Well, we'll give you a food basket for that many people. collect work-appropriate clothing and invite family to participate in the distribution of the clothes. So incorporate when we help and give support to clients, help the family too. Next slide, please. And then we can also create a community advisory group. A community advisory group is not the people we usually have around the table for our professional staff advisory group. It's people from the neighborhoods. Graduation rate disparities are reduced by up to 145% when programs work with a community advisory group. We can use the advisory group to review different program requirements, to help us find staff who are knowledgeable about the lived experience of participants, to identify services that benefit our participants, identify barriers to access, and to essentially market our programs. What some programs have done too, to really sustain their efforts to address diversity and inclusion, is to join an already existing community group that focuses on the same areas. And then so that they find like-minded individuals in the community, and that helps the treatment court stay focused and feel like they're part of a bigger effort in the community. And another thing that you can do is consult the Equity and Inclusion Toolkit for guidance on forming a community advisory group, because it looks a little different than your staff advisory group. Next slide, please. So my last slide. A few key takeaways. Although African American and Hispanic individuals are less likely to graduate in some treatment courts, certain practices lead to more equitable outcomes for all individuals, those practices that I just enumerated. And whatever innovations that you do identify and develop, be sure that you seek input from your participants and the community on the impacts of the changes on them before you actually implement them. And of course, it can also be helpful to have them involved all along the way in your innovations. Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Amanda now as we go to the next slide.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Amanda Johnson. I'm a graduate from treatment court in North Carolina. And what she was saying is good. I liked it. What I got out of treatment court is that I was thankful enough to have two women in my corner that supported me. And then one is my case manager, and that was Edna Rainbow. And my staff one is Justin. Justin. She her name is Cheryl Fowles. Them two ladies, Cheryl Fowles, she did my assessment. Cheryl Fowles was the one that pointed me to going back to school. When I came into treatment court, uneducated, but by talking to her, she mentored me to go to school. Edna, with her encouragement words and stuff, she introduced me and gave me support with my with the 12-step program community, and she supported me that way. So, and both on one African American, and it's a Latino, and both of them helped me in treatment court. Treatment court. And with the support with the two ladies in the program treatment court, and having my family to support me, I was well on my way. Yeah. So I liked that. And you can also tell I gained my family back, and I graduated. I graduated from treatment court. And treatment court, they have given me dreams back. And with the support of treatment court, I have 15 years. I have 15 years, and by doing that, I have 15 years. I have 15 years of claim. I went from sleeping in abandoned houses to owning a house. Like I say, they introduced me back to Cheryl, introduced me to go back to school, and I have my bachelor's today. So now, and that's what, that's what they did for me. And that's where treatment court introduced me to a community that is like a family. And they can understand some of the hurdles that I go through and stuff. Today, me and Cheryl, we still talk practically every day. We still talk and stuff. We get along. Still communicate. And that's one thing that it did. I like being on the board advisor, because not only being on there helping, yeah, not only helping me, but I'm learning as well. And now I get to travel. By doing the treatment, I know been all over. Just to name a few, I know been to Ghana, I've been to Kenya, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, and just name a few. But I like going because not only treatment court also taught you how to give back, how to help the next person, because they helped me. They helped me with mine in treatment court. And I thank God that treatment court was there for me. And I thank God for the treatment court, for the people that's coming behind me, that they have an opportunity to go through it and get their dreams back. Hopefully they'll get their dreams back to do what they wanted to do and stuff. That's by me in a nutshell. What is it?
All right. Well, thank you
Right
so
now,
much.
that's all I have.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I met with her a few weeks ago, and she let me know that this was something that was new to her to present, and it was out of her comfort zone. So I want to thank you for being a participant and speaking on our webinar today. And thank you for your service on the REDI advisory board. It's really important for us to hear from people who have went through the treatment court process. I mean, we can do research, provide TTA to treatment courts, but they are experts as well on treatment courts. So I want to thank Anne and Amanda both for sharing their insights. And so we do have time for questions. I have a few questions that I'm going to ask Amanda and Anne, and then we're going to turn it over to the floor. So you all should see that Q&A box there if you want to put in a question right now. I see there's already a few. And Amanda, some people said, thank you for sharing your story. And they said, congratulations as well, 15 years free from substance use. So that's definitely an accomplishment. So thank you so much for, staying on that path of recovery. And so I have a few questions that I want to ask, and I'll start with Anne. And so, Anne, I know you talked about, using these community advisory boards, and we know sometimes it can be difficult for participants to navigate recovery resources. So what can treatment courts do to make this process less difficult?
Sure. Well, if you think about first of all, there's transportation. How do people get places? But I think about accessing community resources more from other barriers, cultural barriers, even barriers of stigma. Many of our participants, as I mentioned, are often marginalized from their own culture and from their families too, because of their pathway into substance use. And so they may be reluctant, even if there is some kind of a cultural resource center in their community, they may be reluctant to go there without some extra encouragement. And one thing that can be effective is what I would call a warm handoff. If you'd like to refer participants to a resource in the community, have a representative from that resource, from that agency or whatever it is, come to your treatment court, maybe to the court even during when you have a docket, and introduce them. And even sometimes what happens is the judge will say to a participant, I want you to step outside the courtroom with the community agency person and talk to them, and they will give you some ideas about what you would find if you went to the agency, or they'll even maybe set up a time to go there with the participant and tour the agency. So warm handoffs, those kind of encouragements to get people to go to places where they may feel shy, shameful, just all kinds of other emotions that put up a barrier to going. Another thing that has been effective is to encourage participants themselves to bring in ideas about activities going on in the community, about places that they find that are helpful, and share that with other participants. Some programs have even created a participant bulletin board where they can post up flyers and information about places they've been and where they've experienced help, so that you create that sense of a collective of people working together toward the same goal and nurturing efficacy. So those are a couple of ideas.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anne. And so, Amanda, I did have a question for you. And so as I was thinking about the title of our webinar, we had the word succeed in the title. And so can you just talk a little bit about, what does success look like for you? I know oftentimes in the treatment court world, we look at, did someone graduate the program? But can you talk a little about what is success for you?
Success for me is staying clean, substance free. That's my success. That's what success means to me.
Thank you. Yeah. And so one thing I would want to add on to that, thank you for sharing that, Amanda, is really allowing the participant or the client to define what success looks like for them. Success could be, being reunited with their family, right? Obtaining an educational degree. So just allowing that participant to have that say in what success looks like to them. And so I think also just adding, other metrics, not always looking at graduation as, is someone successful in a treatment court? So thank you for sharing. And I'll go back to Anne, and then I'll turn it back over to the audience to ask their questions. We have a few in here. But Anne, can you talk a little bit about the importance of treatment court professionals genuinely sharing or showing that they care about their participants and how that can impact them completing treatment court programs?
Yeah, sure. And when I think about, showing you care, how do you do that? How do you show your care? Generally, people who work in treatment courts are people. They're people who care tremendously for others, and they have the best of intentions, but sometimes it doesn't come across to the participants that way. So what can we do? One thing, thinking about culture again, is being really tuned in to meaning, what things mean to the people who experience them. Because as treatment court professionals, we have our culture, we have our administrative procedures and our protocols, and we want to follow those. But how does a participant experience those policies and procedures? getting a better understanding from their perspective, by listening to them, asking them questions. That will lead you to insights, such as what some participants said. All we hear about orientation are rules, 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 but we never hear anything about how this is going to be a benefit to me. So by listening and then changing our procedures and policies, or at least our approaches, we can show that we care about our participants. Another thing we can do to show caring is it goes back to the treatment team culture and what happens at staffing. We want to make sure when we get up from the table at staffing that we're going to be speaking with a united voice, that we've all agreed on the best course moving forward for a particular individual, and that we all essentially share the same messaging with that participant and with all the participants about what's going on and what's happening. And that too will show that we really care about the well-being of our participants. So those are a couple of things that we can do and why it's important.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that response. And so, Amanda, I'll also allow you to reply to that question, just to highlight the importance of your treatment court team showing that they care about their participants. I know you mentioned, one of the ladies, Etna, and I think she's here today, but just highlight a little more about how Etna or some of the other team members, them caring, helped you on your journey.
Sure. They listened they took the time and listened. Sometimes some days it was hard for me, and I could talk to them. I can talk to Edna. I can talk to Cheryl. They listen to me. They show compassion and being honest. Just being honest with them, and be honest with me.
Thank you for sharing. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to the audience, and I see a few questions in the Q&A. And so, Anne, I'll toss this one over to you. You were talking a little bit earlier about getting client feedback, and someone wanted to know, do you recommend the judge ask for feedback when a participant phases up in a court, or create a survey? Is there a best approach there?
I probably wouldn't have the judge be the one asking for the feedback in most circumstances, just because of the power differential and the fact that it's the judge who can judge people, and people may fear the consequences of saying something non-positive about their experience. It's better to have either someone else on the staff who is in a non-judgmental role, or an outside person do questioning that's face-to-face, or have it something more anonymous. Some programs are turning to online software where you can have a survey. You can ask people respond to survey questions anonymously, and they've found that to be an effective way to get honest feedback. And I know that sometimes too, staff will say, "Oh, I know that participants are like, they'll just say whatever they think. They're very honest," but they may not be all the time. They may feel too vulnerable to be honest.
All right, thank you. And so, Amanda, we have a question for you here in the chat. So think about your own experience in treatment court and the program that you went through. Is there anything that you would have changed or made different about the program?
No. Not during the time I was in it.
Okay. All right, and so I will go back over to Anne here. All right, so I think I'm going to paraphrase this. So I think, oftentimes, Anne, you mentioned this idea about not treating everyone the same and not really having that colorblind mindset. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge culture, acknowledge race. And so, this person says, they hear often, we treat everyone the same. And so how do you obtain buy-in from the treatment court teams to address this issue? again, we don't want to treat everyone the same.
Sure. And I think there's real fear that if we treat people differently, that will be perceived as being unfair sometimes. And so it's a matter of identifying the individual needs of a person and being able to articulate what those needs are and how the needs of one person differ from another. As an example, say you have a couple of people who keep early in the program, they keep missing appointments for the program. And so if you treat them all the same, maybe give them a sanction and that's it, you may not get any change in behavior. But the fact is they may have different needs. You may have one individual, say you have a Caucasian woman from a middle-class background who grew up knowing how to manage her time, but she just doesn't do it she rebels against authority. And so she has a different need. She needs to learn how to obey, to function in society. But then you have another young man, he's African-American, raised by his grandmother in a segregated neighborhood. And he never saw people around him who were managing their time in such a way to make it to an appointment. He doesn't even have the tools to do it, maybe. And so he needs to learn, maybe with the help of a coach, how to manage his day, when to wake up, what he needs to do to get through the day. And then maybe you have a third person who's a Latino gentleman, lives in a multi-generational household. He's the only male, and he's grown up in a culture where family well-being takes precedent over the needs of an individual. So he has every intention of making it to his treatment court appointments, but somebody in the household keeps needing him for something, and that from his culture is what needs to take precedence. So what he might need is to have his family come in to the treatment court, meet with the staff, and hear from his family about the kind of problems that he's causing, and have them all come to an agreement that, for now anyway, his needs need to take precedence over other family members in the household. So so by really looking at individual needs, you can begin to recognize that there are differences in what those needs are and how we treat them or meet those needs. And that's where the difference comes in treating people differently in order to get the same outcome.
Thank you for sharing. And so I'll turn the question over to Amanda. If you could talk a little bit more about how your family helped you through your treatment court process and post-treatment court. I know you mentioned your kids and your mother, they were very instrumental on your journey. So, we know family engagement, really having those pro-social networks are really important. So if you could just highlight a little more about that.
Yes, my family, they were very supportive, especially my mother, because she would take me to my 12-step program, to the 12-step program. And she was there. She gave me support. My family, my sons, I have 2 sons, and they gave me support. But the best thing with my family was the grandkids. I have the grandkids and the great-grands, and just seeing them, because when you in treatment court, and after I know graduating and stuff, and continue the 12-step, program, it's a family. It's a family, everybody recovering together. And so my family gave me support. They went to the 12-step program with me. They went to my anniversaries. My mother, she was there for all 15 of my anniversaries. My children's and my great-grands, they was there. And now I'm raising great-grands. I'm raising my great-grand. And it feels good. You had asked a question about success, and I was saying, staying, just staying clean, staying and substance free, staying substance free. But success is when I'm there, I'm liable. They can depend on, my family can depend on me to be there. Success for me is I can go to my grandchildren's programs or whatever they have. I'm there to show up for them. And that's the biggest success that I can ever accomplish. And that's where family play a big role in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. And so I have a question for Anne. So when I first started researching RED and treatment courts, some of her research popped up. This was back in 2017. She published an article, I believe it was 2006. And so here we are now in 2023. And so Anne, can you talk a little bit about the progress that we have made in regard to addressing RED? Just a few kind of key takeaways.
Sure. I remember back when I published that article, I was working for the courts, and I was excited. I got this article accepted for publication, and I went to my boss, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's great, Anne, but this judge, he needs us to do something." And so it just kind of, the study kind of sat on the shelf for a few years. And then around 2010, people from the National Association for Treatment Court Professionals contacted me and said, we're just starting this initiative in treatment courts, and we were looking for researchers who've done any work in this area of racial disparities, and your work was like practically the only one out there. And they invited me to present at their national conference, and they had started a track. And that first year, honestly, the whole series of speakers all day basically were talking about my study, because there wasn't anything else. And now we have multiple tracks, and from a research perspective, there's a lot more focus, of course. But then from a practice and policy perspective, there's incredible number of resources out there now for courts to use. There's equity and inclusion workshops that programs can participate in. There's the work here at American University that's going on. There's other initiatives around the country too. When I first started working in this area at the national level, I felt like I had to really be a pretty pushy salesperson for getting people to pay attention to the issues and being concerned. And that's no longer needed at all. People understand that, we have a real responsibility and ethical duty to make sure that everyone who comes into our programs can succeed in them. And there's a recognition that we really need to focus on how to make that happen. And we're beginning to develop the approaches and the practices to do that. So we've come a long way. We have, further to go.
Thank you. Yes, I always say that, I believe that, treatment courts are effective, but, there's always room for improvement. And I do find it, it's a good thing that many treatment courts do address RED, and that they're willing to be proactive and, make a change in their programs. And so this is my last question. I'm going to give this to Amanda and Anne. Are there any advice or words of wisdom that you would want to leave with treatment court professionals or treatment court participants? And I'll start with Amanda.
Mine is continue to listen to them, to really be honest and listen to the clients, listen to the ones that's in treatment. And honestly, go both ways. Be honest with them, let them know upfront what to expect and stuff. Because when Edna was honest with me about telling me that if I came in with dirty urine, that she was going to put me in jail, that was an eye opener for me. That was started my substance free. So be honest. Be honest with them. That's all I.
All right, thank you. And same question, just any kind of words of wisdom for treatment court professionals or participants?
Sure. Well, you're really kind of taking off from what Amanda said about the importance of listening. Totally agree. And as professionals, we have to remember that for our clients to be honest with us, they're taking a huge risk because we're part of the court system and they can have consequences. And so can we listen to them and try, instead of judging, try to understand them and better, where they're coming from, what the meaning is of the experiences that they're having, and what we expect them to do, understanding the meaning of that to them from their perspective. What does it mean? The stressors, the risks as they perceive them, and having people in our program, on our staff, who can be non-judgmental in listening and supporting our participants is pretty vital to their success.
All right, well, thank you so much, Amanda and Anne, for sharing your wonderful insights. I know I learned a lot. And thank you all for joining us today. Please complete the Zoom poll before you exit. Thank you. Have a great day.